Hello everybody, Harry from GMAT Ninja here, and welcome to the next episode in our series on critical reasoning for the GMAT and the executive assessment. So far in this series, we've really been focusing on the things that can go wrong when you're reading the passage or when you're interpreting the passage for the question. But now I want to take things a step further, and we're going to look at what can go wrong when you're actually looking at the question itself. In particular, I want to take a look today at what happens when you begin obsessing over question types. Now, as I'm sure you've seen in the GMAT, there are certain question types. We've got questions like which of the following most weakens the argument, which of the following most strengthens the argument, which of the following is an assumption the argument depends on. There are types of questions in the GMAT, but you can take that just a little bit too far. If you take a look at the official guide, and I don't know why you would do this, but if you were to go and categorize the questions, I think there's something about 15% of the questions in that big textbook that don't fit neatly into one category or another. And if you take this idea about categorizing questions too far and don't read the question properly, you can miss some nuance that'll help you answer the question. And that's really what we're going to dig into today. I've got 3 examples for you. I've got one shortened one that we'll take a look at first, and then we've got 2 full examples that we're going to go through. And as we do this, I want you to focus on the sort of the nuance in the question. Why can't you categorize this into any particular type? Why can't you just read 2 words in the question and put it into the bucket of this is a strengthened question and off we go? Because if you do that, you're going to run into a lot of trouble. All right, so I'm going to get the first question up on the screen now. Shortened question. There's only 2 answer choices in it, so I'm only going to give you about 90 seconds to take a look at it. But when you do have a look at this, just have a think about why can't you categorize this into any particular question type? Why do you need to read the full question, make sure you understand exactly what the question is asking you to do, and then I'll come back, and as I say, in about 90 seconds time, we'll take a look at it together. All right, best of luck to you, and we'll see you again here soon. All right, as always with these videos, if you need a little more time to think about this one, now's your chance to pause the video. But for now, we're going to take a closer look at this one. So before I put this question up there, I asked you to think about kind of why can't you categorize this question into any particular type? I know it says the word strongest grounds in the middle of the question, but if you immediately go and try and put this into the sort of the strengthened type of question, as you're going to see as we go through this, you're going to end up in a lot of trouble. But I want to leave the question for now because as ever, when we're dealing with a critical reasoning question, I want to deal with the passage first before we worry too much about the question. Now, this passage, and this will become a bit of a theme for this video, this passage can make it look like an argument. It can make it look like there's a conclusion, but really we've just got 3 separate sentences that just give us information about what's going on in this scenario. So breaking down this passage, what I would say about this is something like, so because sudden freezing kills the bacteria, quick freeze is going to market water purification system based on same principle as what is it? As snowmaking machines. But what have we got here? Since process only works when it's cold, anybody that buys one of these machines will still need a conventional system. Now, it might look like that final sentence is a conclusion for the argument, but if you try and break that down, if you try and put that final sentence and then say because, and then put any other bit of it, you'll see that actually this is just one of those passages where it's just information. And as I said, this is going to become a bit of a theme in this video, that if you get sucked into the idea that this is an argument and miscategorize the question, you're going to end up in quite a lot of trouble. So all we've done is taken the information from the passage there, and now let's take a closer look at this question. So yes, it says provides strongest grounds, but provides the strongest grounds for what? And I know this is a very long question, but bear with me, we're going to read the whole thing. And it says, which of the following, if true, provides the strongest grounds for prediction that municipalities will buy Quick Freeze's purification system, despite the need to maintain a conventional purification system as well? So if the first mistake that I see with my students is people just read strongest grounds and then try and go and do something with the argument, or what they think is the argument, but actually is just the information from the passage. The second mistake that I see people make in this question is they look at that question, they go, this is really long, I don't have time to read the whole thing. And they stop when they see which of the following, if true, provides the strongest grounds for prediction that municipalities will buy Quick Freeze's purification system. They stop. They think that's enough. I've got everything I need, and they just go into the answer choices. But as you'll see in a second, that gets them into a lot of trouble. Keep reading. We want the strongest grounds for a prediction that people will buy this system, despite the need to maintain a conventional system as well. So read the whole question, make sure you understand exactly what the whole question is asking you to do. And now we can take a look at these two answer choices. So the first one tells us that many municipalities have old wastewater purification systems that need to be replaced. Now, remember what I just said about people cutting those last few words off the end of the question? If all you're trying to do is provide strongest grounds for prediction that municipalities will buy this system, well, if they need to replace their old system, and Quick Freeze are giving us a system that it'll do the job, it'll purify some water, okay, last sentence aside, it won't do it when it's too cold. But A looks good if you're just reading up to that middle point in the answer choice. If you keep reading that they'll need to maintain a conventional purification system as well, then A doesn't give us any information as to why they will buy Quick Freeze's system despite the need for that second system too. Okay, they've got one to replace, but why would they not just buy a conventional system? Why would they buy Quick Freeze's system, even though Quick Freeze's system means they need that conventional system too? So A answers half the question, maybe, if you don't read that final bit. It doesn't answer the whole thing, so we can cross A out. And since there's only two answer choices here, you know that we're going to go for B here. But if we take a closer look at B, B tells us conventional wastewater purification systems have not been fully successful in killing bacteria at cold temperatures. All right, so what we know from that is that if a municipality, if a town was going to go and buy their conventional system when it's cold, that conventional system is not going to be fully successful in killing bacteria. So they could buy Quick Freeze's system. Quick Freeze's system will work when it's cold. The conventional system will work when it's warm. That gives us very good grounds for prediction that the municipalities will buy Quick Freeze's system, even though they know it won't work at even though they know Quick Freeze's system won't work when it's warm. They know their conventional system work when it's cold. Quick Freeze's will work when it's cold. They've got these two systems. They've got full coverage. B is going to be our answer here. All right, so that gives you a quick indication of what we're looking for in this video. If you try and just read part of a question, or if you don't read the full thing, if you don't get the full understanding of what the question is asking you to do, you can get trapped into some answer choices that look good, but don't answer the entirety of the question. All right, so that was just a shortened version. We're now going to make this bigger, full GMAT question, 5 answer choices. I'll give you a full 2 minutes to have a look at this one, and I'll see you back here soon. Okay, pause here if you need more time to take a look at this one, but let's take a closer look at what's going on here. Now, second question. So I hope you haven't fallen into this way of doing things, but there is that word weakens in the question. And so if you're just reading along, not really reading the question very carefully, and you just see that, and you're like, right, I'll put this with all the other weakened questions I've ever done, that's when you're going to run into trouble again. And that's what we're trying to get on top of in this video. All right, I'm going to take a step back. We'll look at the passage, and then we'll come back to the question and show you why it's different from just your standard weaken the argument questions. All right, so looking at the passage again, this is another passage that gives you a hint that it might be an argument, but there's no premise conclusion structure here. This is not a evidence conclusion. It's just, again, we're giving you information about a scenario here, a setup. So what we've got here is there is an assumption. So we have assumed in the past that intellectual activity is necessary for mental sharpness. But that second sentence of the passage tells us, however, simply talking to other people suffices. So, but talking to other people suffices. And the final sentence gives us the evidence is a study that shows that the more social contact people have, the better their mental skills. So more social contact, they've got better mental skills. So that final sentence, or that the study tells us that there is a correlation between the amount of social contact a person has and the state of their mental skills here. Now, it's very tempting with this passage to say that the second sentence might be a conclusion, particularly if you've just spotted that word weakens in the question. As we said before, you read the whole question and see what you're being asked to do. And in this case, we say, which of the following, if true, most seriously weakens the force of the evidence cited? That's different from just your standard weaken the argument question. And as I said, if you really break this passage down, it's not the case that there is a premise that then leads to a conclusion. We're just given information. We're just given this scenario. The evidence is this study that tells us that more social contact means better mental skills. And the question's asking us to weaken the force of that evidence. So we're being very specific about what we're really being asked to do in this question. So let's take a look at these answer choices and see which of them most seriously weakens the force of the evidence. Be very specific about what the question's asking you to do. So A tells us that as people grow older, they are often advised to keep exercising their physical and mental capacities in order to maintain or improve them. Okay. So that's what they're told to do, but that doesn't really tell us, or it doesn't weaken the idea in this study that the more social contact, the better their mental skills. This is just what they're told to do as advice. It's not really acting against the force of the evidence in the passage, so I'm going to cross A out. So B tells us that the tasks evaluating mental sharpness for which data were compiled by the study were more akin to mathematics problems than to conversations. All right, this is the answer choice that about 25% of the people who take this question go for. It looks good, but let's dig a little bit deeper and see what it's actually saying. So it tells us the tasks evaluating the mental sharpness for which the data complied were more maths-based than they were conversation. Now, the tasks that we're talking about there are the results of the study, right? So the way the study's set up is that they're looking at how much your conversation or how much social contact affects your ability in those tasks at the end. So it is not the case that the B is telling us that the study was not dealing with social contact. The study was dealing with social contact. It's just the tasks we used at the end of the study to evaluate the mental skills of the people were maths-based and not conversational-based. Now, if you think about it, that doesn't really affect the force of the evidence. It just tells us how the mental skills at the end were evaluated. So the people who had more social contact were better at these maths tasks in the study. The people who had less social contact were worse at these maths tasks in the study. That doesn't really affect the force of the evidence. It just tells us what the study meant by mental skills. And so you've just got to read these answer choices very carefully. B is not affecting the force of the evidence, and so we can cross it out. Now, C tells us that many people are proficient both in social interactions and in solving mathematical problems. Again, is that really affecting the force of the evidence here? Okay, many people are proficient in both of these, but that doesn't tell us anything about whether people who are or who have more social contact are better, people who have less social contact are worse. It doesn't tell us anything about the study. It just gives us information about some sort of, I don't know, background population scenario. So yes, C isn't really attacking the force of the evidence given in the passage, and so we can cross C out. Now, D tells us that the study did not collect data, but analyzed data bearing on the issue from prior studies. Okay, so it's not a primary study, but if I collate all these previous studies and come to this conclusion, have I really weakened the force of the evidence? Again, it tells us about the nature of the study, but doesn't in any way attack the force of the evidence cited that will give us this result. So even though D is telling us that the study itself didn't collect any primary data, that doesn't affect the force of the evidence, so we can cross D out. All right, cross 4 of them out. We'll take a look at E. Hopefully E's the answer because it's all we've got left. And E tells us that many medical conditions and treatments that adversely affect a person's mental sharpness also tend to increase that person's social isolation. All right, so as we said when we were dealing with the passage, the study tells us we have a correlation. More social contact means better mental skills. Oh, well, I'll be careful about what I said there. More social contact is correlated with better mental skills. It doesn't necessarily lead to better mental skills. And what E is telling us is that there is some factor, in this case, the mental conditions or the treatments for those mental conditions that affects both these things. And so it is not the case that talking to other people suffices to keep your mental sharpness up, because the social contact is not the thing that affects the mental skills if we listen to what E says. E says that both of these things are affected by some sort of medical condition. So if you get ill, that illness will lead to your social isolation and at the same time affect your mental skills. So we will see the amount of social interactions you have decline at the same time as we see your mental skills decline. But it is not the case that it is the decline in your social interactions that leads to the decline in your mental skills. It was that illness or the treatment for that illness that has affected both of these things. So E comes along and gives us that another factor that affects both these things. That does weaken the force of the evidence cited, because it gives us another factor that could affect both the person's social interactions and their mental skills. And so of those answer choices, E is the only one that really answers the question. E's the one we're going to go for there. All right, so as you can see, we're dealing with the nuance in the question here. If I had just tried to weaken an argument, okay, first of all, there isn't an argument in the passage, but if I had tried to weaken, again, let's say that second sentence looks like a conclusion. If I had just seen the word weaken, tried to weaken that argument, B looks all right. And that's what a lot of people end up going for in this question. It's the most popular incorrect answer for this question. If you take anything from this video, please, 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 please read the whole question and make sure you understand really precisely what it's asking you to do, because it might be slightly different from what you first thought of. All right, I've got one more question for you. We're going to ramp the difficulty level up slightly. I'll give you 2 minutes to have a look at this one, and I'll see you back here to have another go at it soon. All right, final time for today. If you need a little more time to take a look at this one, now's your chance to pause the video. We're going to take a closer look at it now. All right, so question 3 in this video. So I hope you're not falling into this way of doing things by now, but this question says the word strongly support. And so, well, the answer choices try to support the passage, or is one of the passage trying to support what's in the answer choice? Well, we've got that word prediction in there as well. And in the passage, there's administrators believe that, and this is what they believe. Please don't fall into the trap of just looking at individual bits of the question and trying to categorize it and say, well, strongly support. Well, I'm going to put this into the strengthen bucket and do whatever I would do for a strengthen question. There's far more to this question than that. We're going to get to it in a second. For now, let's take a look at the passage and we'll come back to the question in a second. All right, so it's another one, third one. I know we've done, well, 3 like this, but third one in a row where it's like this looks like it could be an argument passage, but again, it's just information. And we just need to know what was said in the passage. So we've got a library that had an old system for photocopying, which was 10 cents per copy. Nice and simple. Whenever you make a photocopy, you just pay 10 cents per copy. We've got a new system. Sorry, I'm going to check the wording of that. I think it is, no, 10 cents per copy. I thought it said 10 cents per page, but 10 cents per copy. Fine. Your words or their words. We're going to stick with what the passage says, 10 cents per copy. New system is that you have a prepaid card that gives you 50 copies at 9 cents per copy. So $4.50 every time you want to buy a card, but you've got to buy one card that's going to give you 50 copies, 9 cents per copy. And we've got this belief from the administrators that despite the convenience of the copy cards and their lower per copy cost, so the belief is despite convenience and lower cost, the number of copies made won't change. Or essentially unchanged. Well, will be the number of copies will be essentially unchanged. Now, you might think I'm being slightly over pedantic there, but there is a difference between the number of copies won't change, the number of copies will be essentially unchanged. That latter gives me a little bit of wiggle room. I could be changed a little bit, whereas the way I had it first to just be like, there's no change, not changing at all. As we said throughout this series, are you using your words or their words? And as you've just seen, change just a tiny bit. Might not change the outcome in this question, but it might change it a lot. And why not get into the good habits? You want to be using as close as possible to the words in the passage as you possibly can. So I'm going to change that, and the number of copies will be essentially unchanged after the refit. All right. So we've got this old system, this new system, and the belief from the administrators. Now let's go take a look at the question. And as we've done throughout this video, really precisely what is the question asking us to do? So the question tells us here, on the assumption that the administrator's assessment is correct, which of the following predictions about the effect of the refit is most strongly supported by the information given? All right, so it's not just a straight strengthen question. Again, we can't just take this question, put it into the strengthen bucket and do what we would normally do with a strengthen question. Each of these answer choices is going to make a prediction, and I want to see whether that prediction is supported by the information that was in the passage. Again, that's not your typical question. Doesn't fit into a nice, neat bucket. We've got to read the whole thing, take a second or two to understand really precisely what the question is asking us to do. Now we can go and get into these answer choices and take a closer look at them. All right, so answer choice A tells us that library patrons will only purchase a copy card on days when they need to make 50 or more copies. Is that a prediction that's supported by the information in the passage? And I'm going to say no, because there was no information in the passage about when the library patrons will purchase copy cards. They're going to buy it only on days when they need to make 50 or more copies. Now, they might buy it on a day when they need to make 20 copies or 30 copies. Well, from the information in the passage, we can't tell. So A is not supported by the information in the passage. Let's cross A out. B tells us that if most of the copy cards sold in the library are used to their full capacity, the number of people using the library's photocopy machines over a given period will fall. Okay. From the information in the passage, we don't know how many copies each person was making. It could be that there were a small number of people making a very large number of copies, or there were a very large number of people making a small number of copies each. So the information in B tells us that, so if most of the copy cards sold in the library use their full capacity, so if I buy a copy card, I'm going to make 50 copies. That means the number of people using the library's photocopy machine over a given period will fall. We can't tell again. We don't know how many copies were made. We don't know how many copies each individual person will make or made in the past. So B, it makes a prediction, but from the information in the passage, we can't tell whether B is a good prediction or a bad prediction. So let's cross B out. Now C is, again, this is the most commonly chosen incorrect answer. Nearly a quarter of the people who do this question think this is the one that's going to be right. And that's typically because when they're doing, or the explanations that people give, is that they take that final sentence of the passage, turn that into a conclusion, read the question, read the strongly support in there, and turn this into a support question. And so C says that no library patrons will increase their usage of the library's photocopy machines once the refit has been made. And if you think this is a let's go and support that final sentence, well, if no library patrons will increase their usage of the library's photocopy machines, then you can see why you think that would support the idea that the number of copies will be essentially unchanged. If you're not sure about what you're doing in the question, if you think this is a strengthened question, C looks really good. But as we've seen when we looked at the question, this isn't a strengthened question. So let's see what we should do with C based on what we know the question is asking us to do. And is C supported by what's in the passage? And in a similar way to we dealt with B, we don't know how many copies individual library patrons were making before. Again, it might be that we had a very large number of people that made a small number of copies, and now after the refit, the number of people making copies shrinks, but the number of copies per person each person makes increases. From the information in the passage, I can't tell whether that's true or false. C, again, it's just not supported by the information of the passage. It's not really worked against, but it's certainly not supported. So we can cross C out on the basis that it doesn't do what the question is asking us to do. Looks good for another question, but not for this one. So we've got to cross C out and we'll move on. All right, D tells us that the revenues from the photocopying will decrease unless most library patrons choose to use the remaining coin-operated machines in preference to the card reader-equipped ones. Now, this looks good on the basis that the cost per copy has decreased. So revenue from photocopying will decrease unless most library patrons choose to use the remaining coin-operated machines in preference to the card reader-equipped ones. If everybody uses all the copies on their card, D looks good. But what if people only use 20 copies on their card? They're paying for 50. They have paid $4.50. Doesn't matter how many copies they make. If they use the whole card, yeah, the revenue is going to go down. But if they only use half the card, revenue's actually going to go up. So D is not supported. It looks good, but only if everybody uses all the copies that they've bought for, or they've paid for. All right. Now, again, 4 answer choices crossed out. Let's take a look at E. Hope E's the answer because it's the only one we've got left. E tells us that revenues from photocopying will increase if copy cards that are purchased are, on average, used to significantly less than 90% of their capacity. Now, this ties in a little bit with what we've just been saying. Okay, 90% of their capacity is, well, 90% to 50 is 45. So if I only make 45 copies, I've already paid my $4.50. That's under the new system. Under the old system, if I was making 45 copies, sorry, I can't draw a 5 at the moment. If I was making 45 copies, that would cost $4.50. All right. So at 90% capacity, the two values are the same. Now, if I go significantly under that, well, let's just say I use half the card. So under the new system, I'll find some space where you can see what I'm writing. Under the new system, 25 copies. Well, I've still got to pay my $4.50 for the card. But under the old system, 25 copies would be $2.50. So if I don't use my card very heavily, I still pay the $4.50, but I don't get that many copies. Whereas under the old system, if I don't make that many copies, I don't pay that much. So based on the information in the passage, even though the number of copies will be essentially unchanged, the revenues from the photocopying will increase if our copy cards are used significantly less than 90% of their capacity. So based on the information in the passage, E looks good. Now, as we said before, if you misread this question, if you miscategorize it, if you think this is just a strengthen question, C looks really good. And I would agree that if this was an argument, and if the final sentence was a conclusion, and if this was a strengthen question, C's making a pretty good case for it. But what we've got to do with these questions is make sure you understand precisely what you're being asked to do. As I said up at the start, there's about 15% of the questions in the big official guide are not easily categorizable into strengthen, weaken, assumption, resolve the paradox. You can't just put them into the bucket. So if you take anything from this video, the one thing I'd ask you to do is to read the whole question. Give yourself a little bit longer on the question. Make sure you understand really precisely what are you being asked to do. It might take an extra second or two when you're reading that question, but in the long run, one question per test at least, it's going to save you a couple of minutes because you're going to be doing what the question asks you to do rather than what you thought it was asking you to do just by reading those one or two words. All right, I hope that's helped. Hope to see you again soon at one of our other videos. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you very much.